The challenge of this session is how do we bring products and services to the next 2 billion, right? It's been a decade since the fortune at the base of the pyramid was written. And so what we're doing today is having a conversation on a progress report. Hi. What have we figured out? Who's figured it out? What are the mistakes we've made? And what's it going to take to deliver the promise either for business or for social to the next 2 billion? Our goal during this session is to have a conversation. We're going to hear in a moment from a few speakers who are going to share what their work is and lessons learned on that. They're only going to speak for about 7-8 minutes each. And then we're going to turn the work over to us as a conversation. And the goal here is to understand what it takes to deliver services to the next 2 billion. Not just the great work that your organization is doing. That's what happens to these events. You stand up and say that. But the challenge we have is what are we learning? What are the challenges? What are the choices? What are the things that as a community we need to think about to get there? And that's our challenge for this session. So let's begin. Gary Cohen, Executive Vice President, Becton Dickinson. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I just want to say I'm proud because I just qualified in 14th place for the East Side to West Side Triathlon, having done that trip, walking 10 times this week. I'm going to share with you practical, real-world experience that's directly pertinent to the topic we're here to discuss. And I hope I can do it all with pictures. Let's start with the first one. This is a picture I took about 7 years ago in Mozambique. It's children who had just been immunized against measles. I was traveling with the Red Cross. They're holding up their immunization cards proudly because they have very few possessions. Even the card is a possession. And this is part of the expanded program on immunization, or EPI, one of the most successful public health interventions in history. When it started in 1974, 5% of the world's children were immunized. Today, 83%. Measles in sub-Saharan Africa, deaths have been reduced by 93%. Fantastic program. But there was a problem. And I'm going to use this picture to represent it. This problem was identified by UNICEF and WHO and others that run these programs back in the late 80s. Devices used to give immunizations were being reused, and disease was being spread from child to child. HIV, AIDS, hepatitis. They didn't want this to continue, but they didn't want to promote it because then mothers would stop bringing their children for immunization. So what did they do? They reached out to industry and said, develop for us something that can't be reused. My day job is with BD. I have a number of other jobs. I won't digress there. But we were the first to respond, and by 1988, we put into WHO field trials what's called an auto-disable device. It physically stops working after a single use. It was commercially available in 1991. A number of other manufacturers did the same. You would think, bam, that would be it. It took 8 years. 8 years to go into broad use. Why didn't it go into broad use? There were all sorts of barriers. I'll talk about distribution in a moment. First, let me describe some of the other barriers. There was no funding for it. There were no policies aligned around it. There was really no requirement to use it. Between 1991 and 1999, all those elements fell into place. And we learned, as a manufacturer, a new business model. 7 factors. If I'm good, I'll remember all 7. Advocacy, to bring awareness of the issue. Appropriate technology at access, at a cost that's accessible. Funding, so that it can be procured. Policy change, because policy guidelines from global organizations or governments are necessary to get broad-based change. Now here I'm going to get clinical data, training of clinicians, and cross-sector collaboration. All those elements fell into place by 1999. Between 1999 and today, 5 billion immunizations have been administered safely to children. Now let's talk about distribution challenges. So this is a great picture. Jason, who I worked with to prepare for the session, I said, how many donkey photos did you get this year in CGI? These are these devices being delivered to a remote area of Afghanistan by donkey, the only way to get to this location. So this was a distribution challenge. How was it overcome? Here's my first key point of advice. We work with public sector distribution channels. In this case, it was UNICEF Supply Division. I'll use another example in a moment on laboratory supplies. It's very difficult to truly get to that last mile in many circumstances completely on your own. So it's a combination of private distribution, but working with organizations like UNICEF Supply Division. I'm going to now go to this photo. This is a laboratory. I took this picture also in Kisumu, Kenya. A typical lab. Dedicated lab technician, microscope, that's about it. What makes this relevant? Well, in the early 2000s, when the global mobilization to address HIV/AIDS and provide antiretrovirals really was funded en masse by the Global Fund and PEPFAR, there were a series of laboratory tests that needed to be done to give that therapy properly. Taking an antiretroviral is not like taking an aspirin. And there's 2 principal tests, the CD4 test, which measures the strength of the immune system, and the viral load test. Well, we were a manufacturer of CD4 tests. And there was no means by which to get these into broad use, starting with the fact that there was no instrumentation, there were few laboratories, and there certainly weren't people who were trained, plus there were distribution challenges. So what happened here? I would say 4 fundamental barriers. One was access, both cost and availability. A second was training. A third was technical service, because we're dealing with electronic instruments. And the fourth was distribution. All of these things were overcome, and these tests are now broadly available throughout the developing world. First partner was actually the Clinton Foundation. They, as they did with pharmaceuticals, they negotiated access prices, and that made a huge difference. Then BD mobilized, and this, by the way, I'm going to refer to 3 CGI commitments as I speak here. BD made a CGI commitment about training laboratory technicians. Between then and now, we've trained 8,300 technicians in 61 developing and emerging countries. We also invested in technical and service infrastructure in places like where I took this picture. This was taken at the Nimbani Village Orphanage, which cares only for HIV-positive children. It's just outside of Nairobi. They typically have about 175 children in their care. Unlike your typical picture of an orphanage, absolutely loving place. It's run by the Catholic Church. On the right is Sister Anne. She runs the lab. On the left is Sister Mary. She runs the entire operation. We donated the first instrument there for CD4 testing in 2005. People said you could never do this type of testing in an orphanage. Sure enough, they're able to do it. But let me fast forward to 2 years ago when they built one of the most sophisticated laboratories in all sub-Saharan Africa. Today, they're doing genetic testing for drug resistance on children because children are more likely to develop resistance to antiretrovirals. And we help them certify that lab. You can do this anywhere with the right support. So this is just a picture from the orphanage. And I can tell you that this is a wonderful byproduct of the work so many of us do. This is our reward. I've been there many times personally, and I've shared in what they're doing with the kids. So I would really encourage you, use your professional capabilities, your organizational capabilities. This is your return on the investment. So next CGI commitment related to this, Dikembe Mutombo, he's the tall guy on the right, we made a commitment in 2008 to outfit his lab in the hospital he built in Kinshasa, DRC, so they can do the same type of testing. Commitment was fulfilled. It was put into place. This is something unique in Kinshasa. I've been to his hospital a number of times. You don't find these capabilities typically there. Distribution challenges. Well, here's an instrument that's used for these tests that was distributed to a remote part only by boat in Zambia. We overcame these distribution challenges principally by working with PEPFAR's supply chain management system. Again, another example of private-public sector partnership. Now, I'm going to go to the last one because I'm running out of time. This is a new commitment we're making now. There's a picture I took also in Kenya, mother with newborn baby. This is how you want it to work. Healthy mother, healthy baby. Too often it doesn't happen. I'm sure you've all heard the statistics this week about 250 to 260,000 women dying in childbirth and about 2.7 million children of the 6.3 million or 6.5 million, and those are dying as newborns. We're announcing this week a commitment of a new device that will gently deliver babies through the birthing process in circumstances of prolonged labor. This is particularly oriented towards developing countries. This was an innovation that was part of the Grand Challenge for Saving Lives at Birth, Grand Challenge for Development. It's 4 governments, Gates Foundation and World Bank. It was brought to us by the World Health Organization. And if all goes according to plan, there'll be an announcement going out tomorrow. I also had the opportunity to announce this at the General Assembly yesterday. This is going to be the first innovation of that type brought to scale, and it's also a CGI commitment. So, key takeaways. I think I've covered them already, and I still have a few seconds left. I was counting up. Okay, I have no time left. I'm in negative time. You need the negative sign there. Okay, maybe you can read the takeaways. We can come back and discuss them. Is that okay? But I've covered them. And policy alignment, strengthening health system capacity, accessing public sector distribution channels, and technical and service repair are all aspects that allowed us to serve the next 2 billion. Thank you.
Great. So I think that was both the first donkey picture and the first birthing picture I've seen here. And Gary certainly used a lot of information in those few minutes, but it caused us to think about stuff for our conversation. You know, you can do this anywhere was one of the things he said, but the complications of the distribution challenges, the size of those partnerships, finding those people, having the technology, none of those are easy, right? And everyone in this room in some way is either thinking or battling with some of those challenges. So thanks for laying some of that out. Radha, do you want to talk about your work with the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Radha Muthiah with the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves. Our commitment was made 3 years ago here at CGI. And in fact, it's the wrong order of picture, so let me just go forward to the one I seems to be backwards here. Here we go. Our commitment was really made to women like the one you see here in the picture. Women who wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and who go out for several hours to collect their fuel for cooking. They often carry up to 70 kilograms of wood on their backs or on their heads because they don't want to go out every day. They don't want to go out every day because when you go out so early, you put yourself at great risk and vulnerability as well. This woman then comes back, and she then slaves over an open fire often, or a very rudimentary stove, for another few hours as she inefficiently cooks the food for her family. She thinks in cooking her food, that's an act of nurturing her family. Unfortunately, the fumes that are emitted from these rudimentary cook stoves are the 4th greatest health risk in the world, contributing to about 4 million deaths a year. So little does she know that while attempting to nurture her family, the process of cooking could actually be quite lethal. Now, in terms of the process and the challenge that we had, the Global Alliance, as I mentioned, was developed 3 years ago. And so our goal, along with our 800 partners, and it's so nice to see so many of you here in the room today, is really to attain a goal of 100 million households adopting clean cooking solutions by the year 2020. Now, what was the challenge? Those of you who've worked in development for some time know that Cookstoves is not a new issue. It's been around for a very long time. Those of you who've traveled have seen Cookstoves in different homes, outside of different huts. You've seen poor ventilated settings. Why didn't it work? Why is this something that we think we can do and do it right this time around? Essentially, it can be boiled down to just a few things. It's at times the wrong product for the type of cooking and the needs that exist, the wrong technology or fuel source, depending on what the source is that's locally available. And often, it's the lack of just some basic training that's necessary to properly operate these new and improved stoves in these different communities. And most importantly, it's the lack of having sort of maintenance facilities available close by so that when something does go wrong, as all of us know with any kind of product, there will be some maintenance requirements. People don't just abandon those stoves, but actually continue to use them. So one thing that we're doing to look at that challenge and address that once and for all is to take a market-based approach towards stoves. We know that a traditional aid-driven approach doesn't work. A stove is a consumer product. It's one that's functional and often really aspirational for a lot of different people as well. Part of the problem or the challenge here is the design, getting the right design in place. But we would say, collectively as a group of 800 partners, the larger elements of the challenge are really the distribution. Getting it out there to those who need it the most, getting the financing for those to be able to purchase it, and also having that after-sale service that I referred to earlier. So what have we done, or what are some of the key lessons or takeaways here as an alliance of 800 different partners? One is invest in the enabling environment. Any market at the early stages of development requires some support from what we would call the enabling market. And in Cookstoves, that enabling market is the development of global standards for stoves. So there's the easy ability, whether it's a user or an investor, to be able to really compare the different products and fuel sources and know what they're getting. Will this particular stove fuel combination give me the health benefits that I'm looking for, or the environmental benefits and the efficiency benefits? So standards are critical. Testing centers. We want to encourage innovation at the ground level in these countries where the cookstove issue is a problem. And so the Alliance, along with its partners, have invested in 13 different testing centers around the world to encourage that kind of innovation. Market-friendly policies, those are so important to be able to get a market up and running and thriving, not just in certain countries, but thriving in different communities as well. So that's lesson number one in terms of what we've learned. Number two, get the community involved in your supply chain. The more inclusive those supply chains are, the more likely we're able to reach our target of sustained adoption and use. Think about it. If you're sold a product from someone you know and from a group or an outlet or a group of women who you know are going to be around and visit your community on a fairly regular basis, you're more likely to buy it from them. When a part goes missing or something goes wrong, you know they're going to be there. So the more inclusive that supply chain, the better, especially on the distribution side. The third lesson is about financing. Regardless of where you position yourself on the supply chain, you want to be able to think about how is that consumer going to be able to afford this particular product. And we at the Alliance have been doing a lot of thinking about that from a consumer perspective, working with different microfinance institutions and rural banks. And that's where this concept of bundling becomes very important. We're not out there to create very specific products just for Cookstoves. If we can bundle it with solar lights, as we saw earlier in the video, and other products and have a household energy solution, that's terrific. That works. We don't need to create separate distribution channels or forms of financing. Leverage what already exists and is trusted by the different households and community members as well. On the enterprise side, financing is just as critical. There's so many small and some medium-sized enterprises out there. Very few are truly investment ready. So when you talk about a market, of course, our ultimate goal is to have investors, investing in and obtaining various kinds of returns, financial as well as social, from these enterprises. But many aren't quite there yet. And so the Alliance has a variety of products that we've had to put in place. Some of our partners are here today to, enabling different funds that we have, to be able to facilitate that path to investment readiness. That's critical. And the last lesson I'd say that we've learned is that, if you don't expect to be in the marketplace after the sale, don't even attempt to get into the marketplace. That's something all of our partners, again, a few of you are here, especially on the distribution side, have echoed very loudly. If you want to get into the market and service the market, don't stop at the point of sale. You do have to be around for service and maintenance after that as well. The other thing I'd say, and this is a picture we took in Guatemala, is it's rare, it's been fairly new for the sector to be cohesive and to come together. They're very large players, they're small players, they're academics, etc. These non-traditional partnerships are what make this market work. And so we've seen the power that a large company can bring in scale manufacturing, but partnering them with a small network of women or an NGO or a smaller SME that's closer to the customer actually is really powerful in ensuring that end-to-end service delivery, strong product, trusted distribution channel, and strong and known sources of financing as well. So partnerships are important. That's what's taken us when we launched from 19 partners to close to 850 today. And the last 300 or so that have joined us have not been in the cookstove sector at all. They've been outside of the sector, but interested in leveraging and bringing what they have to the sector as well. So let me just leave it there, and we can take up any questions that we have later. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, a number of topics for our conversation, right? When is the marketplace the right move, and when is it a social good, right? I don't know how you manage 800 partners, right? How do you manage unusual partnerships, right? How do you figure out the financing, and all topics that we want to bring to our conversation. But before that, Satyan Mishra, did I say your name correctly? That was good. Okay, from Drishtee, please.
Alexander just reminded me that, first of all, the sticker is her ticker.
Yeah, no fix.
Okay, thank you. I'm here. My name is Satyan Mishra. I represent an organization called Drishtee. It's a pleasure to be here. And out of my 7 minutes, I'll still kind of invest 30 seconds to thank all the people from CGI for having me here. This is my 4th visit. And given the fact that English is not my first language, and my speed of speaking will be half of that of Gary, it's a significant investment, I can tell you for sure. It's a real pleasure to be back here. And I can tell you that CGI as a platform is really maturing. I was sharing this with my colleague that this time around there are much more frank discussions. And I'm out here to obviously discuss and also kind of maybe put together certain very frank confessions and points right in front of all of you. Drishtee as an organization is a distribution organization. We started way back in 2000, and we looked at the problem of distribution in the villages. So it was supposed to be the most efficient last mile delivery of products and services to the community. Started off virtually, looking at ICT as a wherewithal of supplying all information, education, health, banking services to the communities, and very soon realized that it cannot kind of it is not a panacea. It cannot solve all the problems. In fact, it can solve very few problems, and then ended up setting up a supply chain network, a distribution network, which has a Monday route, a Tuesday route going into villages, covering 20 villages. each day and coming back, selling products to the small shops in the villages. And then we realized that while we are doing that, there is a whole lot of products that we can actually buy back from the entrepreneurs and take it to the market outside. So this is something which how we have evolved. Our commitment out here at CGI in 2008 was to provide financial services to about roughly around 10 million families, and making it accessible to 10 million families across north and northeast of India, especially in villages. This was a big challenge to us, and at that point of time, the reason why we committed was because we realized that the entrepreneurs who are in the villages, and that the best bet for us to make our model work was to ensure that we go back full in the village, but we should also come back full. And the margins that we can get when we come back full will be perhaps higher than the margins that we can get when we are taking products in, especially like maybe products like solar or FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods. The margins are very, very thin. But then we also realize that when we are coming back full, our value proposition is far higher for the community. So we said that, okay, let's provide financial support to these entrepreneurs, men, women, doing some great work there. Came out here, committed, went back and fulfilled part of the commitment before I realized that that's not it. I mean, you cannot just expect quality product to come out by investing in people and investing in entrepreneurs, enterprises, but you need to train them. You need to kind of build their capacity. You need to ensure that they have the capacity to compete with machines, not just capacity to make very good quality products, perhaps like the one that I'm wearing, but they can make quality products which can be at lower cost, and cost was a decisive factor. So went into capacity building. And then we realized that you cannot kind of build capacity unless you aggregate, unless you kind of really build relationship with community. So it was a full circle for us. We started from distribution and slowly went back to the fact that it's all about community and nothing else. So talking of communities, Drishtee as an organization is trying to fulfill a much larger commitment, not just of us as an organization, but for people in the villages, to ensure that they become sustainable. And sustainability today is a big challenge, not just in India, for communities in India, but worldwide. Marginalized communities are facing this challenge and they're facing this economic unsustainability, which they are not. Perhaps we are much more comfortable with that out here in cities, but villages have been sustainable for thousands of years, and today they are fighting against unsustainability. We can help them, and perhaps it's not a major topic of discussion on this platform today, but most of the things that you hear about women, about kids, I think like maybe man as a social animal has to go back and has to understand that family perhaps is not the most stable unit. We have to look at community as the stable unit where we are most tolerant, we are most comfortable, and that's perhaps the starting point of a new human civilization. So that's what I'm bringing out here. I'm showing you pictures of women who are very proud. They're part of a community which is very proud. They are much happier than what we are. They can be a bit happier. They can remain this way if we are able to kind of provide them with basic jobs right at their doorstep. So if they have to come out of the village and to find a job, then that's perhaps like maybe not helping them, not helping the cities also, where the population is already swelling. At the same time, when we look at providing jobs to the communities, we are also looking at ensuring that it's a complete supply chain inside, not just for getting products out, but getting them the basic raw material, ensuring that every product lies at in the village far long enough to ensure that it creates more employment. So instead of kind of maybe, I'll just kind of come to the slide which talks about the key takeaways. The first is the fact that marginalized communities form a huge market when aggregated, perhaps much bigger than urban markets in cities. The need, but the most important element out here is the fact that the need of the community is the starting point, not the product. Very often we tend to believe that we have a great product and we can take it to the market and it will be accepted. The point is that the need of the community, if you're able to understand that, I'm sure that we can adapt our product to suit that need. The third takeaway out here is the fact that the value chain of products and services, it has to be integrated within the community. It should remain, as I mentioned earlier, it should remain as long as possible within the community. The path I would say that we all of us should take is to ensure that we create a pull. We create a pull for the products or the services, and not like maybe push it down the throat the way we have been doing in cities, because these people have very limited capacity to pay, and they can kind of be much more comfortable if that need is understood and serviced. Finally, the 4 pillars of rule distribution, as we have noticed, are sensitivity. We need to understand, we need to be sensitive about the community. Engage with the community. Engagement is the second pillar. Innovate. I think every place there's room for innovation. And then finally, patience. And then these 4 things, if they're there, I'm sure that we can build a very strong distribution network. Thank you.
So amazing example, right? And lots of consequence for how we get to the last mile. But also lots of consequence of all the risks and vulnerabilities that we see in this work. How much, as you called it, the enabling environment or community to invest in, and all those other systemic issues that surround us. So underlying this question is, how are we going to get to scale, right? So from the last year, from your last few months, each of you, what are you learning and struggling with about how do we get to scale, right? What are the lessons learned in some of this? Yes. There's a microphone coming to you. Sorry. We want people to hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what was said is works across so many different situations, right? One of the issues with getting scale is not just moving products in one direction, it's moving money back in the opposite directions. And that's as difficult a challenge, especially when we start talking about moving either virtual services or goods that need to be paid for over time because of the lack of savings in the villages. We can subsidize stuff into a certain level, but if we've got to go to scale, it's got to be fully commercial. And I'm interested in how we start solving that problem, there's MFIs and there's mobile money, but often our partners are talking about villages which are 2 hours from any place that cash can be turned into some kind of credit. Okay. 2 hours from the nearest mobile money agent, 2 hours from the nearest bank, that kind of situation. Unless we can have those back channels working.
So who's working on that? Who's working on financing at the last end of the mile? Anybody here working? Comment up here. Yeah. What's that? Ann, do you want to take that? He's handing it to you, I think. Thanks, Ann.
I think that is a key consideration, and it's one that keeps coming to us. I'm with Foncose in Haiti, which is Haiti's largest microfinance institution, and we have 46 branches. So we reach out very, very far. Maybe we should have 60, not 46, but basically we can reach most of the country. And we find consistently that people do use us exactly for that, to get money back. So we had to be sure then that we had the technical capacity, meaning we had to be online real time so that money deposited in one place could be available for withdrawal in another place. And now, thank goodness, mobile money is coming into play in Haiti, and that holds a whole lot more potential. So I think what microfinance institutions have to learn is that to get to the next 2 billion, it's not going to be us alone. It's got to be something much broader, and mobile may be the solution, or there may be some other. But microfinance institutions, their advantage is they know their clients, and that means they know the people that are going to be buying your products, and we can help in a whole lot of ways. We can also help with the financing, but in the end, there is still the problem of just scale. So scale in Haiti is not exactly the next 2 billion.
So what's keeping you from going to the 60? What's the scale issues that you confront?
Needing to recapitalize, not having enough equity to move forward. And in microfinance regulation is coming into the marketplace. It's not through the parliament yet, but it's coming. So we have to get prepared for regulation, which we should have been regulated all along. But to do that, we have to really worry about capital adequacy ratios and those kinds of things.
Okay.
But human resources is also always a problem.
Yeah. Come back there in a second.
Hi, Ann. Hi, everyone. My name is Ajeta, and I'm the founder CEO of Frontier Markets. We do last mile rural distribution of clean energy products in India. I think what's interesting about the question of scale is really about who takes responsibility and what your capacity actually is, and then redefining what your role is. So when we're distributors looking at last mile, think about foot soldiers on the ground that are actually bridging that gap between that rural household and some service or product that you're bringing, right? And so the question for scale is capacity. Who has the largest capacity? At least for India, it's the government, right? And so when we think about scale, we're saying, rural financing shouldn't necessarily just be the responsibility of the microfinance institution. It should actually be the government welfare programs that are coming in. And the challenge is that the communities don't know about these programs, or there's no systemic facilitator that allows you to then, get the bank accounts open or the savings accounts open. So that's been a role that we've been playing a lot more to kind of facilitate some of the welfare programs that already exist, so you don't have to recreate the wheel. And then your role is to facilitate that. The second thing I was going to say for challenges is that also, this is true for anywhere you go. If you're going to start in one city, and let's say you're scaling to that last rural village, you're creating a distance by default, and you're trusting people to then facilitate the management and oversight of what you're doing. So that in itself kills your ability to audit, and also make sure you standardize, the service that you're providing. So I think that...
and how are you dealing with that? How are you dealing with that
technology?
Standard?
I think this is where ICT starts playing a really big role. I think that, people do have cell phones now, and we need to start understanding how we can better maximize real-time data collection, real-time auditing, and systems by incorporating technology more into last-mile distribution, which a lot of us are scared of because we don't really understand how it works, but or that it's too expensive. But I think it might be a way that actually helps facilitate that challenge.
So comment in the back there. I don't know. Still have it.
Hi. Alex Eaton from Sistema Biabolsa. We distribute biodigester systems that are prefabricated. And so we're challenged a lot by the last mile distribution and reaching this. And I just wanted to pose a question related to scale, because we've been struggling with it. We've been in this pipeline of social investment and a few other, in this movement to scale with these sorts of initiatives. And sometimes I find that scale comes in conflict with some of the last gentleman mentioned that you really need to have a high level of flexibility with these individual communities and really be sensitive to their needs. And so often I find that as we're trying to scale, we're sort of missing opportunities to be meeting really specific needs in smaller places. So I think it's also important to think about scale in terms of how to put a platform out there to allow other people, or to allow small initiatives to also have an impact and be important, and to allow tools to allow people to maybe replicate more than scale. And I don't know, I think a conversation around whether...
And so in your example, what are you doing in between? If you are faced with the choice between scale of breadth or scale of sensitivity and connection, where you find yourself making the choice? Which way are you leaning?
Well, every time I lean towards scale, it feels cold. It feels like we're missing opportunities for people that we're connecting with and people that we're already working with to deepen that impact and to make sure that the work that we're doing is fulfilling what we want it to do. And when we talk about replicating, we're giving people tools to do the same thing we're doing, and they become experts in their location as we're experts in a technology, for example. So every time we try to talk about massive like rollouts of product, for example, it seems to miss some of that nuance that rural areas require, because they're not really as cookie cutter as, say, an urban environment in a lot of ways. Right. So I just feel like that all of our social investors want us to scale, and it's all about growth. And right. I think that's great because you need impact, but also the conversation needs to be...
Others facing this choice between depth and scale, and how are they facing this choice? We have two comments up here. Maybe up here? There we go. I'll come back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, hi. I do very similar work as Ajeta, but in Haiti on last mile distribution and retail sale of solar lights and solar home systems. And I think what you were just saying rings true with us. We have never really been able to hit the level of scale that we'd like to see and that some others in the field have been able to do in Africa and India. And what I think that we've had to spend a lot of time and effort and funds on has been the development of tools that will eventually enable us to scale. And so I have some here, and so I wanted to share it with Catherine, Lucy in the back, and with Ajayta over here to show them what we've been developing that we can open up and give to other social enterprises that are trying to do solar light and solar home system retail sales in other parts of the world. But it's felt like without these tools, we can't get to that scale. So it's the proper tools for training the entrepreneurs, for getting the customers to use the products correctly. That's been a huge issue where you give a customer buys a solar light, they come back to the retailer and they say the solar light isn't working, and it's because the battery is in the wrong way, or it's because they don't even know that they should be plugging in the solar panel to the light. So that was a lesson that we learned on pretty early, but figuring out how to communicate that to the retailer, to communicate that to the customer is another story.
And how do you rationalize how you're spending your time? Because you can always spend more time doing tools and trainings. How do you figure out what the right mix is?
It's an ongoing iterative process. And what we ended up doing this year finally was taking all the tools that we've been putting together in Word and Excel and our poor Photoshop skills. And then we outsourced it to a consulting firm based in Cambodia called 17 Triggers that specializes in designing, marketing, and training tools for social enterprises. And so we had about a 1-month consultation period with them. We provided them with everything that we've developed so far on our own, and then they really just sort of professionalized it. So I have some of those materials here. If other people are facing the same challenge and they're looking for a firm, we had a great experience with 17 Triggers. We're not quite done with the engagement yet, but I think that should be something that we consider more often, is outsourcing it and looking to specialists to help with that kind of thing.
And a great question of when do you do it in-house and when are you going to find partners? Either comment next to you. I'll come back to you next.
I run this institution called American India Foundation. We are in the business of disrupting poverty in India. We do that through 3 pillars of education, livelihood, and public health programs. So I've been part of this journey only in the last 1 year, so I'm still learning. But I just want to share what the institution has done over the last 12 years.
I think we're more interested in the learning.
So the reach of this institution is 1.9 million. So what we have done is we have decided to scale. And that's a beautiful point. He was asking, do you want to focus on a smaller community and go deeper, or do you want to spread? So that is a decision. It's a strategic decision which you as an institution and the board has to take. Once you have taken the decision.
Which decision are you taking? So
we want to scale.
How come?
We want to reach.
How come? But that's what we're interested in. What's the logic behind going to breadth versus depth? Why do you
So you have to analyze the area that you're operating in. So if you talk about India, there are 800 million poor people. Out of the 1.2 billion, 800 million are poor. 348 million of them are ultra poor who live under 52 cents a day. So it's a decision you need to take. I mean, what you're trying to do, are you going to try and pull up people above the poverty line and help them stand up on their feet and ask them to help themselves? Or you want to just focus on a few people and help them come up to the middle class and come up to, So our decision is to pull people from below ultra poverty level, not even poverty level. So I think some of the points that these 3 speakers talked about are fantastic. That's something we use, partnerships. And the second point is advocacy. And what Ajayta talked about, once you analyze the space that you're working in, you've got, so the answer that we got was the Indian government was focused on all the things we are focused on. They had put money resources for that. And so advocacy is the way we tried using. And so our USP, unique selling proposition, is as simple as this. We'll go into a place, we'll shine the light on a program, we'll shine the light on a problem, we will work on it for 3 years, show impact and show it can be sustainable, and tell the local governments to say, hey, listen, we have shown it could work, so can you guys take it over? So we have invested $84 million of our money, but if you look at the partnerships that have come into and the amount of work that has happened on the ground, that's $520 million. So the leverage of 6. So I think there's a lot of And by the way, we are an institution started with the help of President Clinton in 2001. So there is so much we can do in terms of planning, in terms of strategizing, and in terms of partnership and advocacy. And once you show that your work is credible, the number of people who want to share your journey is just amazing. Thank you.
Come on here. Come on.
Yeah, my name is Willie Foote. I work with Root Capital. We do agricultural finance in Africa and Latin America. So I think to the question of scale, I feel like the challenges we face are so enormous that if you can't scale it yourself, then at least it needs to be a model that can be replicated. And you should be thinking about, is this a blueprint that could work elsewhere? That's just my view. So it feels to me like if you're really at the last mile, whether it's distribution or it's finance or really urban, really rural, where microfinance really hasn't gotten to largely, it's an area where you have a deep market failure, and there's a strong kind of correlation between the size of the market failure and the amount of subsidy that's required to address it. In our country, United States, we subsidize huge market failures that we don't even see, public safety, roads, et cetera, and that doesn't exist out at the last mile. So I guess my big question for the group is, how do you come up with replicable, maybe not scalable in your own little mousetrap, but replicable approaches to funding that subsidy if the Indian government's not going to come in? So just one example in our cases, we do a lot of agricultural lending into global supply chains with big food buyers, mangoes, coffee, cocoa, et cetera. And so we've gotten, for instance, in the case of Green Mountain Coffee Roasters, to provide significant grant funding to basically pay for what they see as a supply chain security investment to build capacity of their otherwise unbankable suppliers. And so to the extent, could you get unusual sources of subsidy providers who are totally commercial in their thinking, but seeing this in a different way that, wow, my bottom line long term is totally aligned with building the capacity of these folks, and is that a replicable model, if not scalable, specifically in that particular instance?
Coming in the back, third row.
I think to reach 2 billion people, though it's a very charming picture, you can't do it on a donkey. You have to actually have vehicles. It's something that people try to deny all the time because the infrastructure's not there and because they do add cost to either your products or your services. But nevertheless, it's a truth that has to be addressed. And if you're going to do anything that's going to reach 2 billion people, it's got to be systematic and it's got to be replicable, as Will is saying, and to really create models that are replicable and are costed so that people really know what the real cost to business or to their services are. Because if you don't do that, you're either going to fail or you're not going to be able to add to your product or your service the money that you need to cover that. But it is a truth that you have to face, but they have to be maintained and they have to be appropriate, and you have to have the infrastructure to support them in an appropriate way. By the way, I'm Andrea Coleman from Riders for Health.
Thanks. Gary, I don't want to make you the donkey defense man, but what's your perspective on this?
Okay, well, the two things, I guess I have a mic. I don't know if that could be turned up or
yeah.
Let's go to this one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll come back on the donkey in a moment. But, I'm listening to this, and I tend to always feel like simple constructs are needed for clarity. And I'm going to share with you very simple things that you may find totally irrelevant, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. So one simple rule: before you try to make something work everywhere, make sure it works somewhere. It goes back to your comment. Second simple rule: if nobody's working on it, it's less likely to happen. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but who's working on it? Who's going to make it happen? The third is one ounce or 1 unit of input has to give at least 1 unit of output. And there I would talk about leverage. In each of the circumstances where we've brought things to scale, we've had something we can leverage. We leveraged Gavi making investments in immunization. We leveraged PEPFAR and Global Fund with massive investments. What's that channel? You need to get into a slipstream, like when you follow a big tractor trailer and the energy pulls you along. Find those, because to try to undertake these massive challenges without that is really for the truly persistent. I count myself among them, and probably everybody here is. Now, my last comment about the donkey, I'm going to have to get the news to the donkey that
he may become redundant, but the only way to get to him is by carrier pigeon.
Comment in the middle. I'll come to you next.
John O'Quick with Management Sciences for Health. We made a commitment in 2011 with CGI to address the single most common source of care outside the household, which is the drug seller. And so a comment about scale and replicability. It was a program that committed to license, train, and rebrand drug sellers. And in Tanzania, that's got 9,000 drug sellers trained, 90% women taking life-saving prevention and treatment close to the household. So there are two issues. What Stephen Jay Gould, a science writer, would say is the conundrum of giant spiders and Gothic cathedrals. That is, if you take the design of a parish church and build it to the size of a Gothic cathedral, it'll fall of its own weight. If you take the design of a spider and grow it to where it's an RV eating size spider, it'll fall of its own weight. So the issues of going to scale, it's adaptations. What works for small things doesn't work for large things. And so we at first were just doing the same training program, partnership with ministries, and realized that you needed to adapt by creating a network of retailers, and that the initial training needed to be made more economical, and then taking it's now gone on to 2 other countries. So the idea of what works small scale is not necessarily going to work large scale, and adapting as you go to achieve scale.
Okay, great. Just a little temperature check. Most of us are saying things that are the right thing to do, and most people working on this are a little exhausted, right? So I'd love to know, where are you wrestling? I mean, part of the challenge we have is we depend on partnerships. These partnerships are hard. Some of the partners we have, the quality isn't there, right? So where are we wrestling with something? Because these all sound nice, but I'm not sure it's giving you the direction of what to do different after this conversation. So what are you working on? What's, lessons learned? What do we got to do differently? What do people in this room have to do?
I think in my experience, Larry Saruma from Nile Capital Management, I think in my experience is really the key of having partners who have the network, but they have spent a lot of money developing this network, and what is it they should give that network to you? I'll give a specific example, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. In many remote places in sub-Saharan Africa, you're more likely to get a beer than any clean water. So some of the big beer companies have really figured out how to reach that last mile. So there are some innovative NGOs who sometimes partner with them to distribute their goods. But for the most part, they have made a lot of investment in creating this huge network. So it is available, but I don't think that, I don't know the metrics of getting them engaged in this discussion. Is anybody from the big beer companies in Europe here? And, I don't even know why they don't come to CGI, but that's a different discussion. But I think they've done enormous work in terms of reaching the last mile. And it is through real experience that we see this.
Great. Other comments? Second row over here.
Hi, I'm Ellen Morris from Embark Energy, and we focus on entrepreneur coaching and training, trying to leverage what's been done on distance learning, to your point. And one of the things we're struggling with is in the creation of these energy entrepreneurs and trying to leverage distance learning advancements that have been made. How do you work in places, in remote areas where a lot of entrepreneurial capacity is, but they need business training and skills and access to finance, when there's no internet and when there's no reliable electricity? So that's one of the technology solutions we're struggling with, and there are some advancements being made. A former Cisco person has developed a portable Wi-Fi that he can sort of download and upload information like a Dropbox. But there's those kinds of innovations, I think, that need to happen to leverage all the advancements being done in distance and blended learning to get this kind of practical education out to entrepreneurs.
And most people doing this work find they're in a side business, right? They're starting to do one thing, and now they got to be a tech business. Now they got to do energy, right? And so as you think about what business should you be in and what should you partner, how are you making those decisions? That becomes an important choice. It's coming to you.
Hi, and can you also stand up?
We have to start standing up now. My name is Sarah Menker, and I'm the founder of a company called Grow Ventures. I'm going to relay off a comment made by the gentleman in the back about are beer companies willing to share their distribution networks, or effectively it's some form of intellectual property that they've acquired over time and spent a lot of time doing it. I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to ask a quick poll to the room, which is how many are NGOs or social enterprises in this room? Okay. Now, how many of you, if I came to you and said, you sit on powerful amounts of information, data about your communities and each community that you operate in, how many of you would make that accessible in an open data format? See?
Depends.
Depends. So one of the challenges that we face as a data company in selecting partnerships is this. The first partners we went to were public institutions. They're public good. They're institutions set up to deliver a public good. Yet the biggest challenge is that that data is viewed as proprietary, but it's that very piece of information that's necessary to mobilize the change that's needed. So I think one of the things we need to explore is how do we make more data open? How do we make it more accessible so
what's working? When you go and talk to these companies and you try and convince them to give up proprietary data,
I keep knocking on their doors until they give it to me. But it's not, but it's persistence. But, you can't be persistent with the number. I mean, we work in the agricultural sector. You can't be persistent with every NGO that's working in agriculture. We have to, maybe it's, Cookstove Alliance type situation that needs to emerge. But effectively, there needs to be some platform of sharing.
Right. So we're reluctant to share, right? Yes. So how do we overcome that?
Yeah, just Gibuluk from Accenture Development Partnerships. Picking up on these last 2 points, we've been working on quite an interesting project with Coca-Cola and a couple of partners on health system distribution. So Coca-Cola use the same bottlers and distribution partners as the likes of SAP Miller as well in Africa. So the old adage of how do you get a Coke anywhere in the world, we can't get vaccines where they need to go. So it's not a physical transfer. It's not about disabling donkeys or changing things. It's about knowledge transfer, technology transfer on best practice. And Coke's probably best practice in terms of last mile distribution, the routings to remote areas, using mappings, why you stop having out-of-date vaccines in warehouses, clogging them up. So it's not open source totally yet. I don't know what the next iteration is. Gates is involved. USA is going to be involved, and it is a big CGI commitment that was featured last year. So it's something to look at and perhaps expand on in the future in this more open source.
Comment next to you, I think.
Hi, Steve Bahar, wearing, several hats, one of which is as a founder and board member of Spring Health, which is a for-profit company selling clean drinking water in about 120 villages in rural eastern India and expanding about 20 villages a month. I'm coming back to this question that Sarah raised and about access to this intellectual property. That intellectual property is very valuable, and it strikes me that you're having the wrong conversation if you're saying, give up your intellectual property for nothing. It might be a better conversation to have, how can we work together to create a for-profit business that will sell clean drinking water? The beer companies can add a business line. It's certainly, in that particular case, that involves trying to come up with ways to have a product that's appropriate for that marketplace to clean drinking water in a cheaper way than they might be doing it otherwise. But if you do that, you're not begging, and you're also making sure that you're paying attention to appropriate market signals. I see the point about there are some places we need more subsidies. I think one of the problems with achieving scale, though, is often we have too many subsidies. So one, we don't know if we're truly achieving scale, so we don't really know what we've done. And if you've got a couple of different missions, one of which is social, it's all well and good, but you also end up making compromises on the business, which ends up being a compromise on getting into a broader marketplace.
Radha, you wanted to add to that? It's coming around.
Yeah,
I'll pick up on that and then go to another point that you brought up, a question you brought up earlier. I think, yes, I mean, I think all of us know for effective partnerships, there's got to be a win-win on either side. And we're starting to see a lot more larger multinational companies, the example you provided of Green Roasters. You know, there are lots of companies who look at this cook stove market that we're trying to address with our partners and say, 500 million households? That's a substantial market. We want healthy households, you know, individuals, those who have more time to do other things and potentially the savings, you know, to spend on other consumer products. So I think there's always a win-win, and I think that's what one has to be able to share. The flip side of it, you know, you asked a question earlier about, you know, should each of you in your businesses now start to extend, you know, to take on side businesses to address some of the capacity. I think for us in the clean cook stove space, it's been an interesting experiment the last few years to have an organization like the Alliance function as like an industry association of some sort. So there's certain things that we can take on for the sector at large that aren't necessarily ones that, you know, individual entrepreneurs should be doing. I mean, you know, one should specialize along the supply chain, what I mentioned earlier, instead of trying to do everything, actually go the other way and sort of limit and do what you do best and then take that portion to scale through partnerships, et cetera. So I think it's an interesting experiment. I think some of the sectors have this as well. And thus far, you know, our partners will have to speak to state whether it's working. But we feel, you know, awareness generating, advocacy, this transparency of information, and working a lot with investors. The number one thing we hear from, you know, whether it's impact investors or larger size investors is this industry is too fragmented. There are no indicators. We don't know, you know, we're looking for deals. You know, it's just too hard to find. So what we're able to do as that intermediary, if you will, is, you know, being able to have that cohesive industry, bring forward, you know, those deals that may make sense. And then when we do have those entrepreneurs and, you know, deals don't go through, we understand what those next steps are, and we're able to actually help build the capacity to make some of these enterprises a little bit more investment ready as well. So I think it's, you know, it's still in process. I can't sit here and claim victory. This is the model, but it's an interesting one that appears to be, you know, gaining some traction. And, you know, some of the results I didn't mention earlier, we had 2.5 million clean cook stoves in the market just a year ago. We're at 8.5 million that have been distributed in 1 year. So something's working, and I think it's a combination of these non-traditional partnerships and the ability to have this group that can advocate on other things so our partners work on what they do best.
Right. Comment in the back there, yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Neil Ghosh from SNV USA. Alex, on your first question, you asked about challenges. So I actually asked one of our donor, just critiquing us. What are the things going right and what are the things you think need to improve? So there's a lot of effort to engage local capacity builders so that they are local. So one of the criticism we heard that, Neil, there is no consistency of some of your local capacity builders you're working on in different countries. So how can you make the quality consistent? So that's coming back to your question on, that's one of the response we received. I don't have an immediate answer. How do you do that? But
right.
It's
a really difficult strategic question of how much can you afford to invest in that?
Right.
Right.
Another more comment I want to make, we just signed an MOU with an organization which is funded by Mr. Gates, is Global Goods. Coming back to the lady, you talked about intellectual property, the gentleman there. It's a bit challenging because in one way we are asking NGOs to work like a private sector, and then we are saying, well, give it away. So here we are asking them to be competitive. So I think I like what you suggested, that if you can give intellectual property on a partnership basis where you can make profit, but the profit can go back. So the Global Goods is a good model that is giving away technology and saying you make money out of that, but at the same time you share it.
Coming over here in the back.
Can you please stand up?
Francesco from Échale a tu Casa, Put Your Heart into Your Home from Mexico. We serve the unattended housing population for home and home improvement. One thing that we cannot forget about how to replicate, how to scale them all, is your market. Your market, it's not only your market. There are your partners. You need to produce a social franchise in order to bring them into the business. They are your main source of resources. Doesn't matter if it's philanthropy or is for profit, and they are your target market. Bring it into the equation, and there you can scale, maybe little by little. We make a lot of social franchises in Mexico, and we have to stop it because it became so big business, they stop working. So we have to recalculate how much they are going to earn in order that they keep on going.
Great, thanks. You want to add to it? Yep. Please.
I think we are, as a community out here and everywhere, wherever I have presented, we are obsessed with scale. This obsession is perhaps like maybe something which is getting replicated from the learnings of one particular sector, one particular group of people in a very different environment. And we are trying to replicate that and replicate the obsession also when we talk about scale. The first and the foremost thing that we need to understand is that where do we fit in? I mean, is it something which what we are doing is the best thing to do for that particular community? And then the obvious question comes in, like, who can decide what is best for the community? Who can decide what is best for that particular market, which is the enigma that we are discussing out here? I think it is the community itself. And then the moment we talk about capacity, like if you are able to build that capacity within the community, then we have to just step aside a bit and then let the community shout for what they need. And I'm sure that they will have perhaps requirement of all the products that we have, perhaps in a different form, and it will be much more required. They are the ones who go by a priority. We sitting out here, we have surplus money in our pocket. We can look at jumping from priority number 1 to priority number 6 if you find something very attractive, get a good deal, say on a mobile phone. But for them, it is very important that it is the priority has to be maintained. What comes first has to come first. And I think the entire question of scale out here is it becomes irrelevant if you're really going to build that capacity within the community to absorb all that is available.
And how many times in the last year has your community told you not to scale?
I think the community would love to have every community would love to have the vertical penetration.
Yeah.
Would like us to go deeper. Look at the family which did not have their meal yesterday.
Yeah.
What can you do for them? They would obviously maybe take up most of the responsibilities. We are taking perhaps much more responsibility than what we can handle. They are the ones who can take those responsibilities.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate your comments of watching scale and listening, but the answer is generally to go deeper, do more, right? And so where are the signals to do less?
Yeah, I mean, I think just jumping off that point, I guess I'll stand up. You're a multi-product distribution platform for a reason, because the cost to convert your customer is really high. So if your cost to convert that customer takes, let's just say you're selling a $5 product with, a 10% margin, but it costs you $3 to convert them, you're never going to be breaking even unless you start selling them more products. And you sell them more products because you've built a trust, you've built a brand. And I think that's really the reason why you do try going somewhat deep. But at the same point, the question is that should you be taking on everything? One of the big questions that we asked ourselves in the last year has been, so we are a for-profit social business, and we asked ourselves, what are we really good at? And what are we not good at? And it's a really good humbling moment when you tell yourself as a CEO, you suck at a lot of things. And so, when you do that, you then start asking that fundamental question: what should you outsource? Who should you partner with, and what are you getting out of that partnership? And suddenly, revenue sharing doesn't become a big deal. Suddenly, efficiencies matter a lot more than that cost to convert. And if you find that fine balance, you actually can be a lot more successful. So a quick example that we did, we're very good at building a marketing and sales channel, and we understand the brand, and we understand how to build a relationship of trust with our households. So after we started selling solar lanterns and small systems, suddenly people wanted 100, 200 watt systems. What we're not good at is installation and finding that right 100, 200 watt system or connecting that to rural bank financing. We had a partner on the ground who was our competitor, which isn't really true in India, because really India is massive. There's no real competitor because none of us are big enough. But they were very good at that, had no sales channel. So a collaboration allowed us to both share that revenue, and what would have taken me 6 months to convert properly to get 100 customers, I got in a month with this partnership, right? And so that was, on a cost perspective, a lot more beneficial. And so when you think about this at scale, you start asking yourself these unit economic questions about what does it cost to scale, and who should you partner with, and why it's worth going vertical or horizontal, or maybe a combination of both.
And anything you decided not to do because of the unit cost of sale?
Yeah, we stopped doing aggressive marketing campaigns on our own. We made our manufacturers pay for it because it didn't add up to our proposition. And that's when it goes back to what Radha was saying is where's the win-win? For us as IFC coming in to do the marketing or the Global Alliance coming in to do the marketing versus us having to always take on that cost.
Great. Comment in front of you. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to comment on getting. I'll stand up, follow the lead here. Comment on quality and getting to scale, especially cross-border. For us, we're going from a commitment of about 70,000 latrines to 1 million latrines. And we're moving that from Cambodia to other countries. The reason people buy, the why people buy in those countries, in Cambodia versus, say, Zambia. In Cambodia, the elements of the purchase, the aspirational part, it's got to be a beautiful product. The purchase has to be simple. There has to be less choice. In Zambia, the aspirational part is actually the tank underground, the pit. And getting that brick right, and that brickwork, that's the most important piece. So how do you scale when consumers around the world are completely different? For us, and I'll give another plug for 17 triggers, even though they're far from here, but 17 triggers, along with the human-centered design approach, with which IDEO is I don't know if they're here, but these two very disciplined methods to both design and then marketing helps us go into a market and look at it critically and then come up with the right mix of supply chain solution and product.
Right.
So I'll put just a huge plug for before you go into the market, do as much disciplined work.
And what's the biggest shift that the feedback gave you in the way you're approaching this business? What's just a practical thing that you learned from that process that you're doing differently now?
How the consumer thinks.
Yeah.
And from there, what's the design? Understanding why the consumers buy has got to be number one for us. Also, real quick, just so you know where we stand, in 1983, we did a donkey cart project, so we're pro-donkey cart, just so you know where we stand on the issue.
Yep, comment here, and then we'll go to the back.
Hi, Mishra Arjun from Lumita. I wanted to pick up on something that Willie Foote said earlier. He talked about two ways to scale. You either grow an organization or you replicate it, both of which work in some circumstances. But often growing an organization, you've got the challenge of trying to learn very different cultures and the cost of the human-centered design that's necessary, for example. We took what I think is a third approach, which again can be done in different sectors, which is we are passionate about scaling energy. And we saw that there was a problem that companies who are in the field trying to deal with have, which is how do you collect the money? And so we said, well, what's the third approach to scaling is to build a platform and then deliver it with people who are already in the ground, understand the culture, and in particular understand how to do the adaptation. So we've worked with a number of companies, including some who are in this room, on building the payment side of energy, because collecting money is just one of them. I'm not saying it's the most important problem, but it's one of those problems that all of the energy companies have to help them reach scale.
Interesting model. When do you replicate, when do you expand, and when do you sort of build a platform? Yes. It's coming to you from up here.
Thank you. Javier Lozano from Sugar Clinics. It's a low-cost diabetes health centers in Mexico. So going to your question of struggles. So we definitely struggle with customer acquisition cost, and we are working very hard to keep it very low. So my question to the panel and the room is how we prepare for social networks or other technology to reach customers at a very small amount of money. And I know that many of the companies in developed nations now use social networks as a very good way to build trust and get the products out there. And I'm sure that in 1 or 2 years or 2 or 3 years, definitely mobile will be in a very high number. So I'm just wondering.
So who would like to respond to that? How do you sort of use social networks at a low acquisition cost? Let's get someone new. Let's take that point. Let's come back to you then. Do you want to answer that?
Sorry. So I think that you're right. People have been using like SMS platforms to try to reach out to households. But, when we did a survey, we realized that no one actually reads their SMSs because they get 100 of them a day. So what we did was we actually started calling them, or we had someone who we trusted within that village area that would actually facilitate that message. Calling was really cost effective. Sending out, videos or a quick flash picture to cell phones is really effective. Most places don't have internet, but a lot of your mobile telecom operators now are using 2G as your platform to be able to provide, links to videos and things like that, which even your basic phones now can get access to at a much lower cost. So I think that there are, relevant ways to get that message out using the mobile platform, which is resonating to, I think your target customer base.
Great. You want to answer that question too? One more up here.
Oh, I need to stand. I think Ajayta has talked about the online social networks, which are probably what you were intending as well. But I think it's very important for the base of the pyramid populations, the 2 billion, to not forget about just the physical, real networks that exist out there in the word of mouth. And I know Catherine Lucy, Ajayta, others have been doing this very well through their women's networks. And that, I'll tell you for Cookstoves, from what I've heard from our partners who do it, there's nothing like a woman telling you that this worked for her. She doesn't have the black walls anymore and her house is cleared of smoke, etc. To have the news spread like wildfire and to be able to get multiple orders. So I think, yes, there's an online component, but for this community, there's a very strong offline component that can work just as well, if not better.
Right. Comment over here. That's it. Thanks, mic runners.
So we actually use a combination of both online and offline. So I'm from Ruma, and we have a network of entrepreneurs selling financial services products. So what we do is we send an SMS advertisement at the time that the customer is making a purchase or making a deposit at the agent. And the message is only saying like, hey, ask this agent about this product. So what it does is just facilitates the conversation. Because sometimes, even when you're there physically, the customer's not thinking about the product. But if you prompt them to ask that question, it's like giving an advertisement at the time when the person that they trust can then eventually explain about the product. So that's worked well for us in delivering new products and services because it saves us from having to send videos that are somewhat expensive to deliver, but it also gives the reach that every customer that we reach about 500,000 customers a month, sees the messages and the entrepreneurs are prompted. And if the entrepreneur doesn't understand, they're going to be embarrassed. So everybody's asking us, hey, what is this thing they're asking me? How do I explain this to them? So that combination of media, online and offline, is really, really powerful.
Sure. Comment in the back over here.
Just to mention that sometimes we have to be completely unconventional. I remember when I was working in Nigeria for Nestle, we didn't know how to penetrate the rural areas now. And what we did, we created a task force. So it was a van and 2 lorries. And they would arrive to the villages. We would have a guy on a bicycle on top of one of the lorry or a clown. The whole village would gather, would explain the nutritional values of the product, and then they would go and sell to the mummies. So in a country where it was absolutely impossible to go through television and all the traditional ways were not available, sometimes you have to be extremely creative, but there are always a way to the market.
Yeah. Coming up here. Thanks.
My name is Salif Niang. I'm with Malo, a rice processing fortification company in Mali. Thinking about radical unconventional ideas a couple years ago. I was at a place called Singularity University in Mountain View, and we're faced with this exact challenge. Like, how do we deliver goods to the last mile? And our radical idea was drones, basically autonomous aerial vehicles. And at first, everybody thought we were crazy because it's basically called a flying car idea. But when we actually did the analysis, did the work, looking at where the technology is heading with drone technology, increasing enormously in capacity, the capability of actually lifting stuff at a much lower cost, potentially putting solar panels on the wings, and we realized we actually can build a viable business out of it. So I'm no longer involved, but it's actually a company that's received funding. If you Google it, it's called Matternet. The Economist has featured it numerous times. And who knows, 5, 10, 20 years from now, we'll be delivering goods autonomously on quadcopters. So
Donkeys, delivery, and drones. We knew where this would go, yeah. Coming up here. Yeah. At the end.
I guess as an ag lender, you could totally change your collection system if you could use drones. So on the technology side, a quick comment, and then I want to pick up something that Jeta said, which I think is really powerful. So technically, one of the things we haven't discussed today, which I think is, it's not a dirty little secret, but it's a big, audacious kind of challenge for folks who are looking for subsidy to work at the last mile, which is impact measurement. And I think the use of mobile and driving down costs, and maybe another way of saying lowering the tax that you impose on your clients by expecting them to collect a lot of data so that you can then turn around and you know, keep your donors or investors informed is really powerful. We've been doing a lot of that with PPI, Progress Out of Poverty Index, but really interesting where we said, okay, in exchange for a farmer who delivers their mangoes in Burkina Faso to the warehouse, will you, in exchange, will you fill out this very brief little survey for 10 questions about your poverty circumstances, and in exchange we'll send you free, for instance, we did a survey, or we asked what would be the top 3 things, and then number 1 in a number of countries was soccer scores. They wanted to send soccer scores in exchange for them. So there's interesting ways to create kind of client-centered, reciprocal ways of collecting data. And then quickly, one other thing is what you said about working kind of with a shared vision and aligned resources and reinforcing strategies and role clarity from a private sector perspective, or like, duh, I'm not going to do this marketing campaigns anymore, I'll find somebody else, is even more important in the NGO sector because, let's be honest, historically NGOs are not rewarded for collaborating. To the contrary, you want to take 100% of all the positive change, take credit for it, and therefore you secure resources. And so I think it's even more important to figure out how do you align yourself when you're not necessarily as bottom line oriented. And I think that's where like industry alliances and really creating accountability from a sector-wide industry block basis and a clean room of data, et cetera, where you can really shine a light on who's good and who's bad is super important.
Right. Please remain standing for 1 second. We're going to wrap up, but one of the things that we do at the end is always feature some commitments. So I want to hear from our first 3 commitments, then we'll come back to our speakers for some closing thoughts. So, do you mind? Yeah, please go. Oh, you had a different order.
We got a different order, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we believe that financial and social financial and social aspects are deeply interrelated in social finance. They are a singularity. And Deutsche Bank and Moody's believe that incentivizing institutions to focus on the customer or the social aspect is as important as the financial aspects. And drawing on our experience as one of the earliest fund manager, about 16 years ago, we started to do microfinance funds, and Moody's more than 150 years experience in sort of measuring and tracking performance. We are jointly sort of committing to launch a microfinance social performance enhancement consortium.
Deutsche Bank will design and develop a social bond where the interest rate will be linked to the social performance of the microfinance institution. The financial instrument will reward social performance as measured by Moody's Analytics Social Performance Assessment for microfinance institutions. The funding will be the first of its kind, and we hope a model for future financings.
Great. Thank you.
So I'm Willie Foote, Root Capital. We're a nonprofit agricultural lender that's working to grow rural prosperity in poor, environmentally vulnerable places in Africa and Latin America. And so we do that by lending capital, delivering financial training, and strengthening market connections for small and growing agricultural businesses like Milo Traders. So in 2008, here at CGI, we committed to create best-in-class financial training to help unlock the growth and resilience of the agricultural businesses that we serve. Specifically between 2009 and 2012, we dreamed of building the financial management capacity of 150 rural enterprises that aggregate roughly 100,000 farm households. And so today I'm honored to share that we exceeded that commitment by strengthening financial management of nearly 200 agricultural businesses, and we did that just in the last year alone. Moreover, we hit a big milestone this year as an organization where we topped cumulative lending of $500 million, financing 425 businesses that are providing better livelihoods for 750,000 farm families, so representing about 3 million people. And we've done this by working in kind of pathological collaboration with a number of CGI members who are here, such as, and in particular, the Skoll Foundation, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters, as I mentioned earlier, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Citi Foundation, General Mills, and the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, or ANDE. So thank you all.
Thank you.
So, agriculture accounts for 1/3 of Africa's GDP and employs 65% of its labor force. Despite this, less than 1% of outstanding commercial bank loans today are to the sector. Largely because the lack of agricultural data creates market opacity that makes lenders, that makes this unattractive to lenders. As an Ethiopian, who was a Wall Street trader for nearly a decade and used extensive amounts of data, I founded Grow Ventures to try and change this. Through strategic relationships and partnerships with the African Risk Capacity Agency and commercial banks, Grow Ventures commits to mobilize $25 million in loans to East African farmer-based organizations by 2015, leveraging our expertise to create a new wave of data-driven credit products. Big data is often broken down into 3 V's: volume, the amount of data that exists; velocity, the pace at which it's changing; and variety, the forms in which it comes. In African agriculture, there is little to no volume of data, and although the continent's velocity and variety are rich and complex, both are basically uncaptured. As innovators in real-time data collection and aggregation, we're capturing the 3 V's. As financial experts performing complex data analytics, we're adding a 4th V, value. This commitment has the potential to spread beyond East Africa and catalyze investment throughout African agriculture. Hope you can join us.
I've asked all the commitment makers to stay here at the end, so if you want to find and learn more, you can come up here. You want to have some closing thoughts, Gary?
Sure. I figure I stand up so I can.
Yep.
It's not on, is it? Nope. Now you got it.
Yep.
I spent most of my life telling people I am standing up. So just really quickly, it's interesting that we've talked a lot about mobile phones without using that as an example, and it is the one phenomenal example of an innovation being taken to scale. And I think it's worth to take a step back, which I won't do now, but just mention a few things. Transformative, clear benefits, prosperity creating, independence creating. What are the factors? Plus, the level of investment and capacity behind it to drive the cost down and establish the distribution to get it into broad use. That can't be for everything, but I think it's an interesting comparison. Compare that to ORS and zinc, which would save the life of a child who will die from diarrhea. Diarrhea and pneumonia are still the 2 leading individual causes of under 5 mortality. Pennies, no more expensive than buying time on a mobile phone, but it's not gone to broad adoption. So what are those factors? And what are the priorities where that combination of clear benefit and the amount of investment and capacity, and I also think in organizational capacity to take something to scale, that we collectively as a community can prioritize to replicate the mobile phone success?
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Lots of things have been discussed today, and I think I would just summarize them by saying, what we've seen in the clean cooking sector is very similar to a lot of the challenges which we've been discussing in other sectors. As we look to how do we deliver products and create markets for the next 2 billion, instead of enterprises expanding their scope to do so, enterprises should really shrink their scope, specialize, and then engage in partnerships, as we've been talking about. The more non-traditional, the better, whether it's, for large multinational companies who can afford some of the, the technology and the manufacturing and the marketing, et cetera, with those who are, smaller and close to the markets and have the trust and credibility with the consumer. There was some discussion about, tracking the finances on the way back, et cetera, once you sold a product. Those, again, can be done not through existing enterprises looking to expand their scope, but really to partner with different organizations who can support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll try and stay away from the entire debate on replication and scale. But one thing which is beyond debate is the fact that we are running in 2 parallel lanes. It's supposed to be a relay race, but all of us are kind of running it individually, the entire 4 laps. If we just shift our frame of reference a bit, come on the same lane, I think it can be a very wonderful relay race that we can run together. One thing which I would like to kind of definitely also mention here is that the first partner in this relay race is not you, not me, but the community. So let's start from there, let's start from the need, understand the customer, and I'm sure that maybe this particular race can be very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for the conversation. Help me thank again our speakers and equipment makers. Thank you very much.